Congressman Adam Schiff of California, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and a member of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. I'll ask you the same question I asked your colleague on the committee, Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy. Were you surprised about the 9 Republicans who voted with all of the Democrats to hold Steve Bannon in contempt?
I was surprised. It's telling about this era when you're surprised and delighted to get as many as 9 Republicans to uphold our system of checks and balances and hold people to account when they ignore congressional subpoenas. But that is the status of things these days. So I'm glad we did, that it was a bipartisan vote, and it was a bipartisan vote that went beyond our committee.
At many points in the Trump era, we've had to pull out, civics books and understand the process. Can you explain the process to us about what happens after the House votes to hold Bannon in contempt and how quickly it takes place?
The Speaker will essentially transmit this criminal contempt finding of Congress to the Justice Department. That should happen, I think, very soon. Then it will be up to the Justice Department how quickly they bring it before the grand jury, or even if they bring it before the grand jury. It's certainly our expectation that they will, but that hasn't always been the case. Here, though, I think there are lots of signs why the Justice Department is likely to take this very seriously. They made it very clear to Mr. Bannon they were not asserting executive privilege and didn't think that he had one to apply here. What's more, even if Bannon had some colorable claim, you can't just not show up. So this is about as strong a case for contempt as you can imagine. And I also think that the Justice Department recognizes the need to reestablish the rule of law and that no one is above the law. So I'm optimistic, and the quicker the better.
And if they don't, then what?
Well, look, I think it will still have a deterrent impact on others. But the deterrent impact will be a lot less. If the Justice Department decides they're not going to prosecute, then what's to stop other witnesses from similarly saying, well, clearly Congress's oversight power is a paper tiger. So we would pursue other remedies. We would have to look at things like inherent contempt. We'd have to look at civil litigation. But as we've seen, civil litigation in particular can be very time consuming. And were we to go to the route of criminal or inherent contempt, and Congress use its inherent power, if we were to, for example, impose fines that way, we would still have to go to court to garnish the wages of anyone who is in contempt. So no easy answers. The very best answer is the one we pursued.
Congressman, can we speak about Steve Bannon as a witness? Liz Cheney put up a couple of clips from his podcast on the eve of the insurrection, making very clear what he was directing Donald Trump's supporters to do that day, talking about targets, talking about attacks, talking about focus, 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 used the word maniacal. What is your interest in Steve Bannon as a witness?
Well, our interest is he apparently knew or expected there to be violence on January 6th. He was in communication with the president, so he must have some information about what the president was contemplating for that rally, what would take place. He may be able to shed insight into whether this was the plan all along. If Mike Pence wouldn't do what Donald Trump had been, urging him to do, Bannon may know about the organization or the funding that went into those rallies. And the only way to find out is to be able to put him under oath. So that's what we intend to do. There are a great many witnesses, in addition to Steve Bannon, that can help us fill in the pieces as well.
Congressman, we covered the impeachment investigation that you led, and each witness came in, in a different part of the story, but they all testified to the same picture of this corruption of the relationship, of this extortion of President Zelensky, of Donald Trump wanting dirt on the man who would ultimately become his general election opponent and defeat him. I wonder if you can just speak to the investigative approach to this investigation. Are you looking at building a case in a similar manner? And is the target, the focus, the White House?
Our target really is to shed light on everything that happened in the run-up to the 6th, on the 6th, what role everyone played, the former president, what role members of Congress may have played, what role these white nationalist groups played, who funded and financed this operation, and to make a series of recommendations about how to protect the country. But let me, just shed a little light on why I think this is so important. And it gets to that pattern that you mentioned, that we had seen the corruption in the administration and the greater and greater abuses of power. You can draw a pretty straight line from Donald Trump's escape of accountability over his Russia misconduct, his invitation to Russia to intervene in 2016 to help them get elected. You can draw a pretty straight line between, getting off the hook on that to the very next day after Bob Mueller testified, being back on the phone with Ukraine, seeking another nation's help to cheat another election. And when he escaped accountability for that, you can draw another straight line to him trying to cheat in even new and more devastating ways in the 2020 election and the insurrection that followed. And so there needs to be accountability, because we have seen so amply what happens when there is a lack of accountability.
Do you have any doubt that Steve Bannon is covering up Donald Trump's true communications and conduct and intentions in the hours and days and during the insurrection?
Well, if he wasn't, I don't know why he would be seeking to thwart our inquiry. But look, I've had experience with Steve Bannon. When the Republicans were chairing the Intelligence Committee, they subpoenaed him as a witness. And he refused to answer anything but 25 questions that had been written out for him in advance by the Trump White House. He had that kind of disdain for Congress even when the committee was run by Republicans. He believes he's above the law, as indeed Donald Trump believes he's above the law. But I hope they're soon going to find out from the Garland Justice Department they're not above the law. No one is above the law.
It's an interesting point, considering the pardon. I mean, he was pardoned for committing crimes of fraud against Republicans, or at least ideologically aligned people, when it came to building the wall. What kind of witness do you think he would be if he ultimately did comply with the subpoena and answer all your questions?
It's a good question. How much the fear of a potential perjury prosecution would move him. He would know that in the case of the current administration that he would not get a pardon if he attempted to deceive the Congress. But you're absolutely right. Nicolle, I have to say I'm astonished every day that you have a situation where a man runs for president on a platform of building a wall that Mexico is supposed to pay for, an absurd idea to begin with. He becomes president. Mexico doesn't pay for a wall. The wall doesn't get built. His pal, Steve Bannon, and others start raising money from his own supporters to build the wall, and then they steal the money from his own people, and then he pardons them. It's just a group of complete grifters, and it takes your breath away that anyone who led that grift could run for any office in the future. But it is an illustration of just how dangerous I think it would be to let that man anywhere back near the Oval Office.
Well, and this is exactly who they are. And this is a final point. This is who 202 of your Republican colleagues voted today to side with over the rule of law,
yes,
over
yes,
the. What do you think of them?
I wrote about this in my book. What Trump did to tear down our institutions would not have been possible without so many enablers in Congress. And they continue to enable him and enable the big lie, which is undermining the foundations of our democracy. So stunned, but at all, again, not surprised.
Yeah, shocked and stunned, but not surprised is sort of the name for the times in which we live. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for spending some time with us on a day like today. We're grateful.